everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to say we are making a DIY project today for the upcoming So You Think You Could Craft challenge. Now this challenge is focused on using the material fabric, and with fabric you can do a lot of stuff. So today I decided we're going to make a DIY bench. It's pretty simple and easy. I've never upholstered anything before, but I'm gonna do it today. So this should be interesting. But before we get into it, I want to thank the hosts of this challenge, Melissa Makes It DIY and Artsy Maddie. Thank you so much for putting this on, and thank you for letting me be a part of it. So without further ado, let's take fabric and make it into something new. So the fabric I'm going to be using is actually this shawl that I got at the thrift store, and I'm going to be pairing it with this coffee table top. So on the bottom side of this top, there are screws, so I'm just using my power drill and taking those screws out one by one. I wanted to remove these so that I could easily attach the legs when it was time to do so. And these screws and brackets were actually used to attach the coffee table top to the old base and legs. And now that we won't be using those base or legs anymore, I figured that these screws were no longer needed. So next up, I'm using a paint pen. Yes, a paint pen and not a Sharpie marker because I couldn't find one. And I'm using that to trace along the edge so that I can cut my foam to size. And instead of centering this board over the foam, I decided to push it up against the edge just to give me the opportunity to cut less foam in the long run. However, when I lifted the board, I realized you could not see the line that I just traced, probably because it was a white paint pen. So I went back to my supply bin, still couldn't find my Sharpie marker, so I ended up using a blue pen instead, which actually worked out pretty well because it actually cut a little bit into the foam for me. And the blue ink was visible enough that I felt comfortable moving on to the next step and cutting. So let me preface this by saying that I know this is absolutely not the safest way to cut foam. I don't know the right way to cut foam, but I will say that this was a very dull knife. So please don't be alarmed. I was not going to cut myself, and I struggled trying to cut this foam. So that's how dull this knife was. I really need to sharpen it. But anyways, using this dull knife, I just simply cut along the line that I had previously drawn. Once I had my rectangle cut, I simply laid it on top of the board that I was going to be using as my bench. Once the foam was perfectly centered on the board, I used my cushion wrap and laid that on top of the foam. After centering that and making sure I had enough on each side, I used my scissors to cut off the excess. Once it was cut, I laid the cushion wrap on the floor and then placed the foam and the board on top of that. This was just to make it easier when I stapled it down. And I made sure that the foam and board were centered on the cushion wrap before I put my first staple in. Now, to reduce the likelihood that the wrap would actually bunch up in certain places, I put a staple on each of the ends to use as my starting point. By starting in the middle of the board and working my way out, I could easily pull that material towards the end in order to smooth out the top. So I just continued on stapling the wrap down. I made sure that the staples themselves weren't too close to the edge or too far in either. And once my staples got close to the corner, I just folded the excess material over itself and then stapled it down. Because it was thicker material, I used more than a few staples to make sure it was secure. Once I was absolutely sure it wasn't going to come up, I used my scissors to cut off the excess material. I simply went around the edge and cut as close to the staples as possible. With that complete, I took my shawl fabric and placed it on the floor and then placed the board on top of that. And because this fabric has a pattern, I should have made sure that the board was centered before I started stapling down. The pattern detail is not as symmetrical as I would have liked, however, I still really like the look of it. And as you can see, the fabric itself was only slightly wider than the board itself, so it posed a little bit of a difficulty when I was actually stapling down. However, it was stretchy fabric, so I managed. And so simply following the steps that I previously had done, I folded over the corners, pulled it taut, and then stapled it down as many times as I thought it was appropriate. Now it might seem like an excessive amount of staples, but I wanted to make sure that the staples were actually going through the fabric and the cushion wrap in order to go into the wood. And once I thought it was properly attached, I again went in with my scissors and cut off the excess fabric. And because the edges seemed a little bit rough, I was planning on covering the bottom of this bench with some fabric as well. And instead of using the old base, I decided to go with a different style of legs for this bench. So I found these matte black, modern style legs and purchased them off of Amazon. Now the fabric itself, the pattern, seemed a little bit more traditional, so I wanted to play it up a little bit with something and contrast it with more modern style legs. So I simply took the legs, flipped them upside down, and placed them in the corners to secure them. Using my drill and the screws provided, I simply drilled them down into place to finish this bench. Everyone, that is it for our DIY bench today, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you like this video and you want to see more videos like this, definitely make sure you give it a thumbs up. This channel is all about beginner-friendly DIYs and updating your space on a low budget. So if that's something that you think you're interested in, definitely make sure you subscribe and you hit that little notification bell so you're in the know when I post again. And once again, I want to thank the host of this challenge. Thank you again for letting me be a part of this. This was truly a pleasure, and I look forward to upcoming challenges in the future. But once again, I want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!